Good afternoon, folks. Thanks for connecting with the Pennsylvania Game Commission today. My name is Lori. I'm just going to kind of give folks, the stragglers, a little bit of time to keep logging on. In the meantime, I would like to make sure that those of you that are already with us are able to hear us. Maybe you can help me do a sound check. On the right of your screen, you'll see the Go to Webinar panel. And towards the bottom, there is a question box. If you are able to type me a note that says you can hear me, oh, thanks, Mindy. That would be great. Excellent hearing from some folks saying they can hear. Thank you so much for your help. So today we are fortunate to be joined by Game Commission Wildlife Education Specialist Lauren Ferrari, and from the Ned Smith Center for Nature and Art, Research Coordinator Scott Weidensaul, and Licensed Bander and Site Coordinator Nate McKelvey. And today they will be sharing with us the details of what happens when banding saw-whet owls. We are shooting to keep the session within your lunch hour. We expect it to last about 40 minutes, maybe with another 10 to 15 minutes for questions. The session will be recorded, so if you need to leave us, that's okay. Don't panic about missing anything. You will receive a link to the recording, and the recording will also soon be uploaded to the Game Commission's YouTube channel. You'll be able to find it there as well. You'll be able to send us questions throughout the seminar there in the questions box. We will field them at the end. And I think with that, that wraps up all of the housekeeping. Lauren, I think I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks you, Laurie, very much for the introduction and making sure we're all on the same page. And as Laurie mentioned, my name is Lauren Ferrari, and I am a wildlife education specialist with the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Today, we're happy to present the first collaborative from the field, which is featuring the Ned Smith Center for Nature and Art. This presentation is actually the 5th of our From the Field series, if you'd like to see our other ones that we have. And these aim to give you a feel for being in the field with wildlife professionals. From the Field is brought to you by Wildlife on Wi-Fi, which is Pennsylvania Game Commission's platform for remote learning and virtual lessons. And before I turn it over to Scott and Nate for introductions, I just want to inform everybody that due to the nature of the filming with being outside, the sound does change periodically throughout the program, so you just might need to adjust for that. With that, I'll turn it over to Scott.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm Scott Weidensaul, and as Lori said, I'm the research coordinator for the Ned Smith Center for Nature and Art in Millersburg in Dauphin County. And for the last 25 years, I've been overseeing a Saw-whet Owl Research program for the center. We have 3 full-time banding stations that operate every fall in Schuylkill, Dauphin, and Cumberland County. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the kind of work that we've been doing, working with this really remarkable small owl that turns out to be really common, but is rarely seen and still kind of mysterious. Nate? Nate McKelvey, are you there? You have to unmute yourself.
Hey there, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi everybody. Yeah, sorry about that. I'm Nate McKelvey, and it is a pleasure to be with you. I've been involved in this specific project since 2004, and I teach middle school science, and we are done for the year, so I'm feeling great right now, and hopefully all of you are having a great educational experience wherever you're at today. Part of my passion with this project is being able to use these amazing little creatures to educate people and help them to be more aware and more conscientious of what's going on around them in the natural world. So thank you.
Thanks, Nate. Yep, Laurie, we're ready whenever you are.
All right, folks, we're going to play video that was recorded out in the field, so you may need to adjust your volume.
Hi, I'm Lauren Ferrari. I'm with the Pennsylvania Game Commission, and welcome to another episode of From the Field. Today we're going to be talking about saw-whet owl banding, and I'd like to introduce you, Nate McKelvey. Nate, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? why we're here tonight, and yeah.
Happy to, Lauren.
Sure.
Thanks for being here. Yeah, my name's Nate McKelvey. I teach middle school science, and in October and November, this is kind of a side opportunity for me and many others on a great crew. I have been a licensed bird bander since 2002. I've been involved with this project since 2004, and at this location here at Hidden Valley Golf Course, the Chateau, this is a station that's been an active Saw-whet owl banding station for over 20 years. So it's a really special opportunity to keep collecting data at this specific location over a long period of time. So that data is really powerful. I am one of many on the crew here that mans this station from the beginning of October to the end of November, basically every night if the weather permits. So we're here from dusk until midnight.
Okay, so we're about to open our mist nets, so it's kind of hard to see in the dark, but basically as you see the light move down the net lane, you can see it looks like a bunch of mesh material just kind of sitting on top of each other. So we're going to go ahead and open up the nets. And each net has 4 pockets that would catch a saw-whet as they fly by. Nets are about 10 feet long. You can see there's a slight pocket here that when the owls hit the net, they will fall into that pocket, and they'll be stuck in that pocket until we actually retrieve them from the net. So we're going to show you what it might look like when an owl actually hits the net. So you can see with this stuffed animal that we use that when an owl does come into the net, they'll fly in and the pocket catches them, and they'll be hanging in the bottom of that pocket uninjured until we come and remove them from the net and take them down to the banding station for processing. So in order for us to catch the owls, we have to play what we call an audio lure. And basically what that is a call similar to what the saw-whets use during their breeding season or their mating season. And that noise actually attracts them on their migration south. So what we're doing here is just putting the speakers out on the landscape so that the owls can hear that noise as they're flying by. Because we're at a remote site, we do have to use batteries to help us create that sound, so we're just hooking them up now. And these speakers with the batteries will actually be really loud, so the owls can hear them as they're migrating. And we're about to show you what that would sound like as they're flying by.
Okay, so it sounds like you all have been introduced to the net process and using the audio lure, the recording of a male saw-whet owl calling for a female. Obviously it's not breeding season, but it's kind of a way that they can be cued to something interesting in the woods as they're migrating. So they might fly in, check it out. What's this really loud saw-whet calling out of season in the woods? It's curious, so they come in and would hopefully safely land in our mist nets where we can easily extract them. And when we do that, we put them in a cloth, breathable bag. And when birds can't see, they tend to be very calm. So we can put them in here, and I have my hat in here since we don't have an owl in hand right now. And we can bring them down, and the first thing that we do is weigh them. We weigh the bag and the owl all together. At that point, then, we can take the owl out very carefully and make sure that the owl is safe. And then, see my nice owl? Okay, very good. Now we can weigh the bag and find what the actual weight of the owl is. Okay, so at that point we'd record that on our data sheet right here. Obviously we record a lot of data, and it's really important that when we have this owl in hand
we are getting as much data as we can in a reasonable amount of time, and this is really, really helpful. This station is one of over 100 different Saw-whet owl banding stations across North America, and there's a collaboration called Project OwlNet, and this allows us to communicate with other stations. It allows us to understand what's going on. Maybe if someone has a specific research project that they're doing, then we're aware of it. So Project OwlNet, this goes into a database where we have all have access to that, and this is really, really important information long term.
Nate, with Project OwlNet, what's the main purpose as to why we are capturing owls? Is it a population-based thing, or what's the main purpose of the
great
project
question.
started?
Yeah, so if you've seen the Pennsylvania license plate, the WRCP license plate, the money from that license plate goes to the Wild Resource Conservation Program, which is part of DCNR, which is kind of their biodiversity focus. When they decided to put the Saw-whet owl on the license plate, the thinking was that these owls were pretty rare. There wasn't a lot known about them. They weren't all that well studied, and so there was a big focus on learning about Saw-whet owls. Fairly quickly, once there was some concerted efforts at banding, we realized that they actually aren't all that rare, and they're in migration season quite abundant, moving through Pennsylvania. They breed in the boreal forests for the most part and down into New England, limited in Pennsylvania, but as they migrate, they'll definitely pass through Pennsylvania, down and through the Appalachians into the Alleghenies and into the Smokies and maybe even further south. So we now know that these owls, because of simple bands, we can put these on them, very inexpensive, very harmless. These are permanently placed around their leg, and if anyone ever finds this band again, alive or dead, then they can report this band number, and they'll know that it was banded by someone here at our station on a certain date. We know how old they are once we take a look at their age, and this is really, really important data. So this kind of mark recapture method of studying wildlife is very common, and it's one of a number of ways that we can study Saw-whet owls. So to get back to that question, we do it because most of what we've known about birds over the generations of studying in ornithology started, or at some level comes from banding. It's kind of one of the most basic ways that we can learn about bird movement, population dynamics, and so this is a really important baseline. We can do other things like radio telemetry, where we track their movements. We can put on something called a geolocator, which can give us a really kind of broad idea of where they're at, and it can track them wherever they're at on their migration pattern. But we also have to get that device back. It records that, it logs it on that little device. So there's other ways we can study them, but banding is the most basic, most important thing we can do just in getting data from each bird that we catch. And hopefully, if they're recaptured again, then that's really, really important because we now know where they came from.
So the other night when we were with Nate, unfortunately we weren't able to catch any owls. So tonight we are here with Bracken. He's another volunteer through Ned Smith Center, and so he is going to show us how we can actually band an owl and show you all the tools of the trade.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bracken Brown, one of the Ned Smith volunteers. I work at Hawk Mountain Sanctuary as biologist naturalist. We're fortunate enough to net one owl tonight, and I'm going to go through and show you how we band it. And over here as a scribe is one of our volunteers.
Hi, I'm Amy. I've been volunteering on this project since 2011.
And this project would be nothing without our dedicated volunteer base. So let's get processing this bird, and we'll show you how we collect some scientific data. All right, so before we take this owl out to actually do the physical processing, rather than take it out of the bag measure it and then put it back in a bag to weigh it. We always want to take a gross weight of this bird coming off the ridge. So gross weight on this bird is 106.0. Once we have a gross weight, we're going to take the owl out of the bag, and then we can weigh just the bag and get the owl's body weight. These bags were all made by volunteers, so better seamstresses than I, and they are phenomenal for keeping these birds nice and calm. Once you cover the eyes, they tend to calm down quite a bit. So 25.7 is the bag weight. And this is our target species right here, the northern saw-whet owl. And first thing you want to always do when you catch one of these birds is check the lower legs to make sure that it wasn't already banded by another project. Project OwlNet has a lot of stations throughout North America. So always check to make sure this bird isn't banded.
Bracken, I notice it's clicking its beak a lot. What is that?
Yeah, so you guys at home, if you feel a little terrified or unsettled, that is an owl's natural defense mechanism. So they'll click their beak to be big and threatening and hopefully scare you away. From saw-whet size to human size, not terribly threatening. I'm going to transfer this bird into the bander's grip for processing. So first thing you always want to do is make sure you band the bird first, because until it gets the band, you can collect all the data you want, but if the bird gets away from you, then you're going to have a null data point. So this is a leg gauge. The bird banding lab commissions specific band sizes. We know the majority of saw-whet owls are going to be a 4 short, so this notch right here. Some of the smaller males can accept a 3A, so you just want to make sure that you're checking that you're putting on the correct band size. So I take that 4, put it on the lower leg, and you wiggle it and make sure that the band isn't going to ride over any of the joints. It has plenty of room to move around. So this bird is indeed going to get a 4 short band. So we have our band strand issued through the USGS Bird Banding Lab. They're a unique set of numbers. Each band has a 9-digit code, which I'm going to read out to our scribe here. But those of you at home, you can see that there's numbers, there's a prefix that indicates the band size, and then you have the unique 5-digit secondary code. So this band is going to be, get it where I can read it, 1014 53611. So that is a unique number. Only this band in this size has it. And so we are going to mark this individual. And this is a set of banding pliers. This accommodates the size 4, the larger hole size, and then the size 3A there for the smaller bands. And notice how I can't close it any tighter than this point. And so we know as long as we use the leg gauge, we cannot hurt the bird putting the band on. So it's just going to go on like a nice bracelet, ideally. So the nice thing about bander's grip, I'm not squeezing the bird, it's just relaxed, feeling restrained in my hand. Sometimes they bicycle kick. And so when we go to put the band on, make sure it goes on the tarsus. I can feel the tarsus or the lower leg of the bird at the back of the band, so I know as I gently close it, I'm not going to shut it on the leg. And then you never clamp the band closed at first, because owls have this nice feathering all the way down to their toes. So we can rotate the band around, make sure it's riding on the leg properly. And once we're happy with our final size check, we'll do a final clamp. and this helps round the band back out. And the most important thing with these butt end bands is you want to make sure that they're meeting each other flush in the middle. So if this bird gets caught again, misnetting isn't going to get stuck inside the band and make it difficult for the next researcher to pull it out. So going through, we have the weight of the bird, which was, what was the total weight?
80.3.
80.3. So after processing excess of 12,000 owls at this point, we can tell the gender of most of the owls we catch by taking a weight measurement associated with a wing chord. As with most raptors, female owls tend to be slightly bigger than the males. So I'm going to do a relaxed wing chord. This is known as a wing chord ruler. You just press it up to the upper joint on the wing and then gently lay it down. This bird's going to be 138 for the relaxed wing chord. And we actually take 2 wing chord measurements because that relaxed wing chord can change depending on humidity. So we're going to take what's known as a flattened wing chord, which is used in Europe quite frequently. And this bird is going to be 143 flattened. So flattened, once you flatten the wing out, it doesn't matter what humidity it is, you should always get the same distance measurement. We're going to age the owl, and being a raptor or predatory species that needs to hunt, they're never going to be like a duck or a goose, lose all of their flight feathers at the same time. So it will take them multiple years to replace their flight feathers. So what we're looking here in the wing is there any variation in the flight feathers here? So we check with the group. We have interesting, it got mussed up a little bit in the net, but we're seeing nice even dark brown according to my glasses here. So this is looking good for a hatchier bird. So that's the age. That means it was hatched in probably May, June of this year. And we can always verify the age as it grabs itself here. So cool thing about owls, and this is important on collaboration, this was actually discovered by a rat researcher. He was doing blacklight studies of rats in a barn, and one of his items, there we go, one of his prey species actually got picked up by a barn owl, and the barn owl glowed. Amy, do you mind doing the light? Yeah. So see all of this faded, hopefully this is showing up, this bright pink raspberry coloring. That is the chemical porphyrin, and owls use this to build their feathers, and this chemical fluoresces under the black light. Now the nice thing about porphyrin is it wears out due to solar radiation, so sun exposure. So the older this feather is, the less porphyrin will be there to fluoresce. So you'll begin to get multiple ages in the flight feathers there as this owl goes through its second and then third year stage of life. So an older owl, you're going to see multiple generations of flight feathers in there. So that's an excellent tool to just confirm this is a hatchier bird, even porphyrin dispersal throughout the flight feathers. So we're not going to do anything fancy like taking a molt card on this because they're all the same age, grew it this year. All right, so talking molt with these raptor guys, this owl can never afford to be flightless at any point. So I said, looking at the flight feathers here, which are the longest feathers that the bird uses for lift, you see they're all a nice, even, chocolatey, dark brown tone. We can actually use this to age owls out to about the third year, because next year this bird's going to need to begin replacing flight feathers. So it's going to work from the outer and innermost point of the wings. So these outer few primaries under my thumb, and then the inner tertials and secondaries are going to begin to get replaced. Now, depending how well this bird's eating, will determine how many feathers it goes into replace. But if this bird's caught next year, instead of all of these flight feathers being a nice even chocolatey brown, you're going to have two tones set here. So the outer ones are going to be nice and new, so they're going to be the chocolatey brown, but this inner bank of feathers here is going to have been exposed to the sun for a year, so they're going to wear out and become a more chalky, lighter brown color that really stands out to the naked eye. And if you use that black light technique, definitely you'll see the fresh feathers are that raspberry pink color, whereas the feathers that are over a year old are a more chalky white. Keeping on with the measurements, so these are just general morphometric measurements that you can take to assess the health of the bird, and variation between regions across the country, as well as gender. So we're gonna look at our chart that is the product of all of the years of effort of catching these guys and recording the data and doing some genetic analysis to determine what sex this bird is. So tail is going to be a 69 on this bird, and at 80 grams with a 138 wing, Project OwlNet has generated this excellent chart that allows us to determine the gender of the bird using that wing chord measurement as well as the weight. So this bird had a wing chord of 138 and it was 80, so it's definitely less than, or that's greater than 86. Read my charts. There we go. So less than 86 grams, 80. We fall in this unknown category, so we can't call it a male or a female because there's overlap between the genders depending on how recently they ate. These birds are flying south out of Canada, so it could be later because of the migratory effort. But this chart is excellent because with a high degree of accuracy, we can say whether a bird's a male or a female there. Another measurement, more kicking, and when they try, raptors always want to get you with their talons. That's the working end of the raptor. They need their eyes to, hunt successfully. So they're always going to lash out at you with their talons first. We call it bicycle kicking. You can see why if she goes for, or it goes for me again. And we're going to take a measure of the culmen. So I'm placing the calipers at the tip of the nair, or the nose hole in the beak, staying with the hard portion, so I'm not jabbing any soft tissue on this bird. They definitely don't like you being in their face like this, but if you do it right, and I always like to take a couple measurements here, so you can be confident with the accuracy of your reading. And this, of course, is the point the birds don't really want to cooperate with you. So, bracing against my finger. .2 is the length on the calipers here. We're going to take another health measurement given the year we're in. A bird that's getting ready to migrate is going to store fat. They store the fat right under their skin, which is nice and thin. So the place they store it is up in the wing pits. Owls are very fluffy, so that would require us to blow to expose the bare skin to assess whether it's storing fat. We're not taking that measurement this year, but you can give a keel score, which just like on a roast chicken, that breastbone there, I'm feeling the ridge of the breastbone, and noticing how the muscle tissue is coming up to that ridge. Again, we have a nice chart. We scored these through 5, 1 through 5. And it's all based on how sharp the keel is. So a very emaciated bird is going to have the muscle tissue falling away from the bone, so you have a nice concave approach. And then as you get to a fat bird, the muscle tissue is gonna bulge up. This bird definitely has a keel, but the muscle tissue is coming up nice and even to it, so I'm gonna score it as a 2.5, which is pretty normal for saw-whet owls. And then we're going to take the ALULA measurements, and ALULA is a score. So on a bird, the ALULA is essentially similar to a thumb, and it helps with fine-tune motion especially as they're coming into land. So see how we have these 3 feathers sticking off the leading edge of the flight feather. I'm going to assess how much white is on the inner side of the feather vane. Easiest way to do this is from the underside with light. So I don't know if you can see that feather sticking out. We have these 2 spots here, and I'm looking at how far across the vane that white stretches, so towards that central shaft. So we have these 2 spots. One is a 50, and then the second also extends out to a 50. One's wider than the other, but you're just looking at how close to the central shaft they come. So I'm going to score this bird's right ALULA as a 100, and then shift over to the left ALULA. Don't know if you can see that on camera, but it's a similar pattern with those 2 white spots extending out into the middle. They don't always match on both sides, but I'm going to score this one as a 100 as well. So this bird is even, which is pretty typical in hatchier birds. And the amount of white in the wings seems to indicate the health of the bird as it's growing that feather. So again, we're building a database. You want to take as many measurements as possible while you have the bird in hand. So that can go towards our long-term data sets and help round out our information and what.
Eye color.
Okay, and that's the final one, right? So eye color is another fitness score that we do, and that requires the bird to actually show us the yellow of its eye. So right now you can see under the bright light, it's not showing a whole lot of the iris there. So we're going to use a nice paint chip to score which color yellow matches this bird's eye color the best. And it's showing me some yellow. So I'm going to go, there's nice bright coloration. Don't know if you guys can see this, but I'm scoring this as a 336.
Bracken, is that paint chip thing consistent throughout all the other stations?
Yes, so these are our consistent chips, and we do see birds, there's always exceptions to every rule. So these 4 paint chips do not encompass all the owls we see. We'll see some saw-whet owls come in with more green cast, and that's something we take note of on our data forms. So we're continuing to record and build that database. That's all the data we need on this guy?
Yes, it is.
All right, so some cool things about owls. Everyone knows an owl's known for flying nice and silently. How do they do this? If we look at the leading edge of the flight feathers there, notice there's all those nice little serrations on the edge. Those act like airfoils, so they're interrupting the airflow as the bird's flapping down to gain lift, and that acts as a silencer. So that's how an owl actually can fly silently and literally listen its way into its prey item. The downside, if you're interrupting airflow, that's cutting down on your lift, so owls often fly a lot slower than a similar sized bird. And if you look closely at the feathers themselves, they often have sort of more of a felty texture to help with silencing the airflow. Owls are an excellent conservation initiative species because everyone can't help but love an owl, especially with these facial discs. What's cool about the facial disc is notice that the feathers look a little different around the eye here. They're designed, so evolved to let noise through the facial disc. So they act as sort of a radar dish funneling noise down to the ear canal. So owls can literally listen their way into a prey item. So these guys love rodents. So a rodent running around in the leaf litter, this owl can hear that motion. Its flight isn't drowning out the noise, so it can listen its way into the prey. So if you're watching an owl hunt, you'll notice their head comes in on the prey item, and then at the last minute, they flip their talons. So behind the facial disc, we have the ear canal of the owl. They have asymmetric ears, which means this ear opening is down on the lower portion of the facial disc. On the other side, it would be pointed slightly up. If you can see up the ear canal, see that blueberry looking thing at the back? That's actually the back of the owl's eyeball. So to be able to see in low light conditions, they need a lot of rods to collect as much light as possible. So their eyes are actually a tube shape. So they're not able to roll their eyes in their head, which is solved when you can rotate your head almost 270 degrees around. So they're literally scanning the habitat around them, listening for prey items, and then following it in to make a hopeful kill. Typically, you'll find these guys roosting with half a mouse tucked under them, keep it nice and warm through the winter months. So they can have dinner as soon as they wake up. And you might think, with most migratory species, they fly south because of the cold, kills off prey items, that sort of thing. These owls are designed for the north, so the only temperature they're really worried about is actually warm temperature. Anything up into the 80s will be too hot for these owls to survive long term. So these fantastic thick feather coats that they have don't let out any heat, so they can sit quite comfortably up in the far north. The main impact is if snow gets deep, your rodent prey is a couple inches down, that's out of reach for these guys. So they'll disperse south to find better hunting grounds. But enough about this bird. We'll cut it loose. It's joined the study. It has its band on. So we're going to let it get back out and hunting, and we're going to head up to our nets and check for another bird, hopefully. Thanks for joining us.
So Nate, you said you've been working on this project since 2002. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the research has showed you in terms of saw-whet populations?
Sure. Yeah. In short, it definitely seems that saw-whets are like a lot of our northern raptor species, where they are closely tied to their food sources, which have a cyclical nature, and that has to do with the fir and the spruce trees. The crop of cones, so that they're massed, so they tend to be very cyclical, high one year, low the next, and that has to do with them being able to have their progeny, their young, grow, and so that the what wants to eat those seeds doesn't annihilate the population, so it kind of throws it off. So anything that depends on eating these cone-bearing seeds in the boreal forest especially tends to be cyclical. So the voles and the mouse population, small mammals that depend on pine, spruce, fir, are cyclical. So if their populations are cyclical, then what eats them is also going to be cyclical. So there's kind of this shadow effect. So if there's a really good population of small mammals this year, that means there's going to be a good crop for the young, for the adults to be feeding their young, so their health is going to be better and they can have more babies and support them better. So we tend to see this kind of up and down population for saw-whets, and roughly every 4 years, for the most part, there's a bit of a peak. And sometimes that pans out, sometimes it doesn't, and there's a lot of variables at play in this. So obviously things like weather, if there's disease, all these things are at play. But definitely one thing that we've learned is the fact that they're fairly cyclical in nature. We also found that their peak migration in this part of the world, in Pennsylvania, is roughly the end of October, beginning of November. So we start to band the beginning of October, we end the end of November, and there's definitely a pretty clear peak, and then it tapers off toward the end of November. And that's what we're getting into now. Things are cooling off, and the owls are fading away. Doesn't mean they're not there, but the population is less. They're not actively using the same corridors. So if they're here for the winter, then maybe they've dispersed, or maybe they've just moved on.
Is there any way for folks that are interested to help contribute to the project or to the Ned Smith Center?
Great question. So the Ned Smith Center is kind of the umbrella organization that helps to support this project. And there's a way that you can support this project as well, through adoption. So what we can do is direct you to online resources, but this is a great way for people to get involved. In this COVID year, we're not having visitors at our sites, but it doesn't mean you can't support. So what an adoption is, you don't get the owl, unfortunately, but you would get a nice certificate showing a picture of the owl and the band number. So if that owl is ever caught again, you would then get a certificate saying your owl has been captured or found, and you'd get the information from that. So there's cost associated with that that helps to support the project. And there are costs with the project. So equipment breaks, wears out, and it's just a lot of upkeep. So it's really, really helpful. It's really important that we have that kind of funding. So Ned Smith Center helps that. There are some grants that we also pursue, but a bulk of our kind of operating costs come through owl adoptions. So visit Ned Smith Center online, and they have more information about how you can find out about adoptions and how you can support them that way.
And all the people that help with the project, they're all completely volunteers.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. There's on average, there's roughly 100 people that are involved in the project between 3 different sites that are overseen in this project. And so that's a pretty good number, and so that means you have anywhere from 3 to 5 people on at one of our 3 stations every night from the beginning of October to end of November. So it's a really impressive volunteer effort, and a lot of people that are just really dedicated to making this research happen and happen over the long term. The longer this project goes on, the more powerful that data is, especially at these 3 sites that we've had: Kings Gap State Park, Small Valley Girl Scout Camp, and Hidden Valley Golf Course here at the Chateau. Those 3 sites have been going on for many years, and that data gets more and more important as we start to look at really long-term trends in populations.
Nate, thank you so much for sharing with us today. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, this is really important research, and obviously what we learn here benefits saw-whet owls and other species that could be managed for, and it also definitely couldn't, besides the support of the Ned Smith Center and individuals that help with donations through the adoption program, there are landowners that support us, so that allow us to come and use their resources and to use their properties for this project. So it's we just want to thank those who are so involved with that, and it's obviously couldn't happen without it. So
Nate, thank you so much for showcasing all the work that you guys do, and thank you for joining us from another episode of From the Field. We'll see you next time. All right, so I hope that you enjoyed the presentation and seeing the different research that Scott and Nate get to do. Scott, is there anything that you would like to clarify before we go into the questions and answers?
I'm not clarifying necessarily. And first of all, I just really impressed with the work that Nate and Bracken and Amy and all the other volunteers on this project have been doing for so long. I mean, it's really a labor of love for, as Nate said, almost 100 people that are involved every year in this. I just want to make sure people watching understand that normally we don't take half an hour to process each owl. Bracken was doing a really good job of explaining why we're taking the measurements and what we're doing, but in the normal course of events, it's a matter of a couple of minutes to band and process an owl. And if we get a busy night where we're catching 30 or 40 of them, we're moving them through pretty quickly. One of the interesting things that Bracken alluded to is this, the work that we've been doing at looking at changes in the eye color and feather color, and it turns out that these are tied together in really complex ways between the age of the bird and, as Bracken said, the physical condition of the bird. In fact, one of our former Penn State interns, every year we have a research internship with Penn State Berks campus. She's currently working on her PhD, but she's been spending years analyzing our data, and we just published a paper in one of the premier ornithological journals last year showing the way all of those, the eye color and feather color and plumage color all tie together to the condition of the owl, which is the first time anybody's done that for any species of bird, showing that the feather color is tied to physical condition. So, in addition to just learning the basics about where these birds are going and how many of them are passing through, it's providing insights into deeper biology about saw-whet owls and other species of birds.
That sounds great. Are we ready to take some questions?
Sounds good.
All right. We have one so far. We may have answered it a little bit. William is asking about has the general population increased or decreased during your study?
I'll take that one. That's a really good question, William, and that's, as Nate said during the video, one of the real strengths of this project is the fact that we've been doing this for 25 years. And we run the same number of nets in the same place for the same number of nights. We don't change anything from year to year. So as the number of owls changes that we catch changes from year to year, those are probably reflective of the number of owls that are migrating through those parts of Pennsylvania. So it gives us an opportunity to look at long-term trends for these species. And in fact, we have a paper that's in press right now with one of the ornithological journals, where we looked at our 3 sites in Pennsylvania, sister sites in Maryland and West Virginia, in Quebec and Ontario, looking at kind of regional saw-whet owl population trends. And one of the things we found is that they're fairly stable. Now, actually, the number of birds that we catch, when you adjust for the amount of effort and the nights and things, what's known as owls per net hour. When you look at the number of birds we've been catching at the Hidden Valley site where Lauren and Nate and Bracken were, our numbers have gone down there over the years, and we're not sure if that is really reflective of changes in the population, or more likely just possibly changes in local habitat, or it may just also be, kind of dumb luck. Some years more owls pass through one part of Pennsylvania than other years. But for the most part, the saw-whet owl population seems to be fairly stable, so that's very encouraging.
Thanks. All right, let's see. We have another question here from Mary. What is the title of the research and name of the journal where the study was published on the color being tied to the condition of the bird? Wow, anybody remember that?
I'm gonna have to look that one up.
That's okay. So, Mary,
well, I tell you, so the title is the best dressed are less stressed, which, try saying that 10 times fast. And then there's a colon, and then there's a much more sedate scientific subtitle after that. And it was in the journal Ornithology. And it's the author, the main author is Christy Wales, Wales, And so if you were to look up, Wales 2019, the best dressed are less stressed, you'll be able to find it.
Fantastic. Let's see, we have a question from Perry. What percent of the birds netted are already banded?
Well, it's interesting because a surprisingly high number compared to other banding projects. I know songbird banders who will have banded 100,000 songbirds over the years and never caught a banded bird. We catch anywhere from 5 to 15% of our saw-whet owls are already banded. So it's not at all unusual in the course of an evening to catch a bird that's been banded at a station in Ontario or Quebec or Vermont or someplace like that. And that's because, as Nate mentioned and Bracken as well, we're part of this very large Project OwlNet network of 125 other banding stations across North America. So, over the years, in the last 20 or 30 years, almost 100,000 saw-whet owls have been banded by other banders in North America. So there's a lot of banded birds in the slipstream, so to speak. And that's given us a great understanding of what their migration routes are, their lifespan. We know that the average lifespan for these birds is only about 3.5 years. They're a pretty short-lived owl compared to, say, a great horned owl that lives 8, 9, 10, 12 years. We know that they have a really high reproductive rate because people have been studying them on the breeding grounds. They're capable of having as many as 11 chicks in a nest if food supplies are good. So all of that banding work has given us a surprisingly complete understanding of some aspects of saw-whet owls' ecology. There's a lot of things we still don't know. I get contacted all the time by wind developers wondering at what altitude these birds are migrating. And the fact is we don't know. We have no way yet of really easily tracking them in real time while they're in migration. So, we've learned a lot in the last 25 years, but there's a lot that we still don't know.
Very interesting. We have a question about what you catch in the net. A couple questions. Are there other foreign birds that you catch in the net? Like maybe where the farthest distance that another bird that you've caught in the net was from?
So that's a great question. I mean, we do catch other things in the net other than saw-whet owls. Every year we catch a couple of screech owls. And in fact, sometimes the screech owls are chasing the saw-whet owls because they weigh twice as much and they will occasionally catch and kill and eat saw-whet owls. We occasionally will catch songbirds like hermit thrushes that are active right at dusk. Easily the strangest thing that we have ever caught in one of our mist nets was a 3.5-foot long dark morph timber rattlesnake, which certainly woke everybody up. That was around midnight one night on a very warm early October evening. We have also caught, on occasion we've caught barred owls, on occasion we've caught long-eared owls. But because we're using an audio lure, mostly we just catch saw-whets. As far as the farthest that we've caught a bird, of what we call a foreign recovery, a bird that was banded in another station, probably Wisconsin, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, Thunder Cape up in Ontario, up on the shores of Lake Huron. We've had a fair number over the years from Quebec. There aren't a lot of banding stations very far north. One of the most interesting recoveries of one of our birds, though, was a saw-whet owl, a female saw-whet owl that we banded at our Kings Gap station at Kings Gap State Park in Cumberland County, that was found nesting in a nest box in central Quebec. And she had mated with a male saw-whet owl that had been banded on the Straits of Mackinac in the northern part of Michigan. Each of those birds had flown about 600 miles. Our bird had flown northwest. The Straits of Mackinac bird had flown northeast, and they found each other in this nest box in the middle of the Quebec wilderness.
Quite a neat story. Lisa is asking if you ever catch bats.
Nate, why don't you take that one?
Yes. We do, especially on like earlier in the season when things are still pretty mild. It's pretty common to see bats flying around, and on occasion we will catch them, but I wouldn't say with regularity. But it's always kind of an interesting time when you get a bat in the net, and it's quite a different extraction with a bat, but it's very interesting, and they're just amazing little creatures.
And we've caught some rare ones. I mean, often we catch, eastern pipistrelles or big brown bats, but we've caught eastern red bats in the net. We caught a Seminole bat one time, which is as many of you know, is a pretty unusual species for this state. We used to have a number of people on our project that also did bat research and had their pre-exposure rabies vaccines, and they got to be the ones to take the bats out of the nets. Otherwise, we make sure that we wear a pair of gloves.
I imagine that's kind of a delicate procedure there.
The nice thing about bats is you can often kind of stretch the net a little bit and sort of just pop them out without having to handle them too much. You want to get them quickly because they can make a real mess out of the net. They can really chew it up.
Oh boy.
But they're not, I'll tell you, they're not as bad as flying squirrels. Flying squirrels are the worst. They just chew gigantic holes in your net.
Oh my goodness, that sounds like a lot of work.
Yes. I used to think flying squirrels were cute, not so much anymore.
Mary is asking if saw-whets are faithful to their nesting sites.
Oh, that's a great question. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Saw-whet owls are actually highly nomadic, and Nate mentioned, or I think it was Nate mentioned using geolocators. We had done a geolocator study on saw-whet owls in 2009, and one of the birds that we put a geolocator on was recaptured 3 years later, had 3 complete migration cycles in its data banks. That bird had nested 1 year in Western Quebec. 1 year it started to nest in Western Pennsylvania. That nest failed, and it flew up into the Adirondacks and nested there. And then the next year it was nesting somewhere near the New York-Ontario border. So they're not at all faithful to their nesting sites, and neither are they faithful to their wintering sites. That same bird some years wintered as far north as the Canadian border, and other years wintered as far south as Western Virginia. So they're highly, highly nomadic. They're not like other birds. Most birds are really faithful to both their breeding sites and their wintering sites, but not saw-whets.
And do they mate for life?
Nope. They don't even necessarily mate for the same year.
Gotcha.
If you have a big year when there's a lot of mice, a female saw-whet will mate with one male, start a nest, wait till the chicks are hatched, abandon the chicks with the first male, and go off with another guy and start a second nest. But remember, they don't live that long, so they need to maximize as much reproduction as they can, as quickly as they can. And if there's a lot of food and the first male can take care of the babies all on his own, there's no loss.
Very cool. So I think that's all the time we have for questions, folks. We want to be able to let you get back to work if you're just squeezing this in your lunch hour. If we didn't get to a question that you'd like to have answered, there are 2 email addresses there on the screen that can help field those calls. You can also send questions to pgccomments@pa.gov, and we can try to help you out there as well. The session has been recorded. You guys should receive an email later today with a link to the recording, and also within the next few days it will be posted to the Game Commission's YouTube site. I'd like to thank Lauren and Scott and Nate for sharing their expertise and their time with us today, and we'd like to thank all of you for taking time out of your schedules to join us this afternoon. We hope you'll visit us again to learn more about Pennsylvania wildlife in upcoming webinars and from the field sessions. Let us know what subjects you're interested in so we can help plan for the future. And until then, we hope you're able to get outside and enjoy some of Pennsylvania's great outdoors. Be well, stay safe, everyone.